My name is Ginny, also known as 2/3 Lotus, everywhere on the internet. This clip is part of my series, The Poets of Twitch, where I analyze my viewers' writing live on stream. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as streamed with all of the imperfections and tangents that come with being live. If you want to catch me live or want more information, check out the description. Otherwise, enjoy some excellent writing. The flowers fall like bodies. You've already won my interest in the poem with flowers. When I was little, I picked a lotus from the pond. My mother yelled when I came inside. Mud now in the carpet and well-kept lawn. But she smiled when she saw the flower in my pocket. She placed it in a vase of water, a plaid bow tied neatly around it. I looked its way each day, and as the clocks turned forward, hours turned to days, and the lotus started to decay. The leaves shriveled up. The petals turned brown. I asked my mother if the flower was starting to drown. She laughed and took it down. Placed the vase where I could see. The petals wore spots. The leaves now float beneath a sea. She said, the lotus is dying. That it would eventually turn to dust. That all things died. So would she, so would I. I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling light, small green stars that glowed so bright. I did not think, I did not sleep. The next day, I dug through the garden, and as I played with my toys, I noticed a flower that stood poised. My mother said it was an aster. I picked up the flower quick, ran inside, grabbed a glass, and placed the flower inside it. For the next few days, I did everything I could to keep her alive, but she died. And so did the next, and the one after that. I cried to my mother, asked her why. She put me in her lap and sighed, we cannot change the facts of life, but we can change what we do. Appreciate what we have and not what we lose. Life is precious and death teaches us that. Do not cry over a loss. Be happy that you were there to see it live. This is awesome. Really, 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 really good. Your writing does keep getting better, and I see it. Now, I'm gonna read it one more time. I know it can be a little like, oh my gosh, she just keeps reading the same poem at me, but I feel very strongly about reading multiple times and just taking time to enjoy the work. A work that is very enjoyable, very powerful. So, when I was little, I picked a lotus from the pond. My mother yelled when I came inside, mud now in the carpet and well-kept lawn. But she smiled when she saw the flower in my pocket. She placed it in a vase of water, a plaid bow tied neatly around it. I looked its way each day. And as the clocks turned forward, hours turned to days, and lotus started to decay. calling it Lotus and not the Lotus actually makes me feel so called out, because people call me Lotus online. And I know this poem has nothing to do with me, but it's very funny. The leaves shriveled up, the petals turned brown. I asked my mother if the flower was starting to drown. She laughed and took it down. Trying to get this straight. She laughed and took it down. Placed the vase where I could see. The petals were spots. The leaves now float beneath a sea. She said, the lotus is dying. That it would eventually turn to dust, that all things died, so would she, so would I. I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling lights, small green stars that glowed so bright. I did not think, I did not sleep. The next day I dug through the garden, and as I played with my toys, I noticed a flower that stood poised. My mother said it was an aster. And I picked the flower, quick, ran inside, grabbed a glass, and placed the flower inside it. For the next few days, I did everything I could to keep her alive, but she died, and so did the next. And the one after that. I cried to my mother, asked her why she put me in her lap, and sighed, we cannot change the facts of life. But we can change what we do, appreciate what we have and not what we lose. Life is precious, and death teaches us that. Do not cry over a loss. Be happy you were there to see it live. So, the flowers fall like bodies. drowningdevil12. It's funny. This feels almost like a Buddhist parable, like a koan, because you use the lotus flower. We've talked about this before, but symbols, in the same way that if you talked about an olive branch, if we're talking plants, if you talk about a lotus, you do create association, because this is a symbol in Buddhism, maybe Hinduism? Yeah. And this is the symbol basically for perfection and enlightenment. And it has to do with chakras and stuff. I'm familiar with these things, but I'm not a Buddhist. Which really does kind of add to the poem. I feel, as this symbol of perfection that we're trying to capture. So you said you don't know how there would be any more interpretations than one, but we already see that maybe this is about trying to capture perfection. And the futility. Or maybe, of course, this is just about that we cannot change the facts of life, but we can change what we do. The sort of moral that the mother gives us at the end of the poem. And it's such a fascinating thing, writing a poem and sharing it, because you can think, I'm honestly not sure how else one would interpret this, but if you get a different interpretation, do tell me. So again, there are possibly 2 interpretations of this poem, or more. I actually was thinking that there is a way to spin this poem, as there always is when you're a queer person and talk about gender. with the self as the lotus and the old self dying and these kinds of things, and particularly the line like the things about not being attached to the old things as they are meant to be. You could interpret it that way. Flowers, an idea of blossoming and growth and change. But the simple understanding is the one that the poem tells us: death. And the flowers fall like bodies. So we're looking at the title, right? This is definitely talking about death. And I honestly think if you didn't have like bodies here and you took away like the mother part, you could have wildly more interpretations to this poem. The mother part basically after like the next and the next. If you just cut that, your poem gets way less specific. And then you have this almost like parable of just trying to save these flowers with no outlined moral. And so that could be an example of, let's say you wanted that. That would be deciding to move your poem left on our now very regular on this stream specificity graph, which I think looks like this. And again, there's no, or maybe more like that. Okay. Where you're over here, you very specifically say at the end of the poem, like, this is kind of the moral, which is good. It's about a mother, and mothers teach us things. If you took out some of that specificity, for those who don't know, x-axis is specificity, y-axis is interpretations, right? So if you took it back on specificity, then you could have more interpretations, which is maybe a good thing. Maybe Drowning Devil, I've been waiting to meet you. I love your... Oh my gosh. So I presume that means you've been watching the VODs. Have you two really not been in chat together before? If so, that's fascinating, and that is so wholesome. And makes me unbelievably warm and fuzzy inside. Oh, it's so cute. Yeah, we're looking at one of Drowning Devil's poems. We're looking at The Flowers Fall Like Bodies. And this was Drowning Devil's response to me challenging him to write something longer. Y'all are so cute. I like my chat. My good girls, my good boys, my good days, my good fae. Which you all don't get to see on screen because it's broken. And Penguino, today on stream, we already read Bukowski, and we had a lot of fun going through both Drowning Devil and Stylish Fails and my interpretations of the poem and how those differed and talked about it. So Drowning Devil has given permission for other chatters to provide feedback on the work. So if you have ideas or things you take out of this as we go, definitely do share. The poem, the screenshot of it is in the Discord, in the channel Teapot, which is the Poets of Twitch, TPOT, Teapot. It's literally my favorite thing ever that it comes out to that. But let's talk about this poem. And I'm wondering, because we can just talk about alternate interpretations. Like, I'm not sure we need to go through the interpretation of just this being a simple story about a child learning about death in the world, but also we could talk about it, and I think the very beautiful and kind of perfect way that you describe it. Or I could go say, well, I'm going to take your comment as a challenge, Drowning Devil, and give you as many alternate interpretations of this poem as I possibly can, because I think it would be funny to spite you. Or I could try to give some larger lesson about poetry and literature, but I'm not sure I see one flatly. I mean, we could actually talk about the idea of a moral. This might be good. So, morals in stories are very cool things, and you don't always have them. The traditional thing that is taught, at least I think in the American school system, when talking about morals and writing, that I feel like I learned in like grade school, was we talked about Aesop's fables. And these are like, I don't know if like the tortoise and the hare was Aesop, but like the crow would like put rocks in like the jug. That was one of the fables that he wrote. And he wrote like very simple stories using animals or stuff like that as metaphor for life, to tell stories generally geared at younger audiences with morals. And it's a very useful tool that you have, as we've talked about many tools, in our poetic toolbox. You are curious about the gender interpretation? Yeah, it's reaching a little bit, but I definitely can go through that one. But when you have something with a moral, I mean, it usually means that the whole story kind of points toward it, and also normally the morals are at the end. So you'll have like a story with some metaphors, you know, the child learning about death through the flower, almost living out like a moral story, a fable, or a parable, and then coming to the moral at the end. Right, with the mother telling. It feels just very, I guess, quaint, in that it tells a story and it gives you a moral. And this is something I've been thinking about lately, because I'm trying to write work more like this. So like, Drowning Devil, you're just 2 steps ahead of me all the time. But I want to write about my transness. I want to write things with morals, and then you just show up and do it way better than I am right now. But it can be useful to start with the moral and identify the moral if it feels like there is one. And I mean, usually you can just kind of tell from reading. You have this whole story talking about something, and at the end, a character learns something, right? So the child, you learned, we cannot change the facts of life, but we can change what we do. Appreciate what we have and not what we lose. Life is precious, and death teaches us that. Do not cry over a loss, and be happy you were there to see it live. Admittedly, this is a very big and very complex moral. You know, like, basically if you take, like, the tortoise and the hare, our moral, right, everyone's, you know, many people have heard this, slow and steady wins the race, right? You have this tortoise, it's not right. Tortoise walking along, and it is racing. I could actually like make the rabbit look good, or is it gonna look really bad? Because I'm kind of happy with this turtle. And it is racing. I draw a rabbit? I could just do bunny ears. A rabbit. Low effort. And they race, and many people have heard this story. The hare runs really fast, and then it stops, and then goes and chews on some grass, and the tortoise just goes a little bit steadily, and then it goes a little bit, and then goes a little bit, and then the rabbit runs really fast, and then it stops, and the tortoise goes a little bit. And the moral here, we know, slow and steady wins the race. Consistent and slow effort in life is better than unsustainable, fast, and just unhealthy effort. I love the contrast in the pictures. Yeah, the tortoise looks like a tortoise, and the rabbit looks like... yeah. Low effort. So... yeah. And this is a great moral, because usually morals are something that is applicable to anyone. I'm even looking at this and I'm like, wow, I could actually listen to this advice and be less like the rabbit, trying to grow my channel and grind. The rabbit. I think the rabbit in the story of the tortoise and the hare is on the Sigma grind set, right? Where the tortoise is chill and just wants steady, sustainable, and healthy progress. And that's the main takeaway from the story of the tortoise and the hare. Clip that. That's such a good, perfect clip. So, and right now I've kind of been on the grind set. I've been the hare. I have a playlist on Spotify called Grind Set. And it turns out that even though these things are written kind of for children, they're very applicable for your whole life. I'm gonna be honest, I never understood slow and steady wins the race until I just explained it. Yeah, it's that's one way to approach the idea, right? And I interpret it that way because that's how it feels in my life right now. And that's an approach to, but the thing is, like a poem, these parables, these fables have many interpretations. But it all goes back to one moral, which is admittedly kind of vague. Slow and steady wins the race. That can be applied everywhere, and you'll be talking in a random conversation, and then that idiom will apply. And that's kind of the beauty of a moral sometimes, is that they're very broad. In this case, you kind of shotgun us with 8 different morals here, even though they're all in the same boat. We can't change the facts of life. That could be a moral unto itself. We can change what we do, perhaps that's one. Appreciate what we have and not what we lose. That it definitely still applies to the story, they both do, but it's bam, that's another idea. Life is precious, and death teaches us that. That's another moral. Do not cry over a loss, and be happy to see it live. Those are all kind of different ideas. And I wonder, maybe this is just an idea I had, because we talked about slow and steady wins the race, can maybe point to lots of different interpretations. I wonder if there's an underlying kind of poignant one-liner that can be your moral that could encompass all of these interpretations. Very possible, right? And I don't know if that's something you would want to do, but I'm not saying what's here is bad. I just had that idea because I was talking about morals. And it can be more useful and more impactful to say something vague and give your reader the chance to interpret it from your thing. Right. Just read low-key a lot more happy mood to this poem than I thought you would write. Yeah, Drowning Devil, it's a happy poem. It's a cool poem, and I love the message you're trying to put out. Yeah, I love it. And I'm gonna go through and talk about maybe like my weird alternate interpretations next, since we've given a little lesson on morals and the tortoise and the hare. But I'm going to ask that none of you watch this ad break that I'm about to run. Stand up. Hi, King Poyo, you just got here. I'm running an ad break, though, to stop the pre-roll that you probably also just watched. How am I? I'm doing quite well. I went to an amazing concert yesterday. I went to the Las Vegas Book Festival. I wrote some poems. Stream has been great. We had a good time talking about Bukowski. So far, we're now reading Drowning Devil. Yeah, you're a subscriber. That's so true. So you gotta give it a sub. I literally like saw the star and I'm like, oh yeah, subscriber, and then I talked about how you'd be getting ads. I am gonna run an ad break though, and take a little break because I need to drink some water. Maybe stim my voice a little bit. Because I'm working on voice training more today. But you all stand up, get away from your screens, drink some water, go to the bathroom, get a snack, all these things. I'm gonna run this ad and pace around my room. Now I can talk like a girl. Not really. Okay. Water bottle desk slam jump scared you. I'm sorry, Pinguino Man. I do apologize. I don't mean to jump scare here. Welcome back. I'd love to see it. Anyways, I love the direct nature of your poems and how bluntness can be very good. But also having some abstract bits sprinkled on top. The line how there's an intruder and you need to get rid is definitely a personal fave. I love how you've now read Drowning Devil's body of work. It's very funny. And very good. It makes me so happy that you all are supporting each other's work, because I think having a community of writers is such a beautiful thing. Jeez, Penguin, I'm smiling ear to ear. Yeah, and yes, Drowning Devil does tend to be a bit further on being more specific, but does throw in these little abstract bits which give you some avenues for nuanced interpretations inside the poem, which are lovely. So, I'm going to talk about this poem as if it is about being trans, which is really funny because it's like the first poem you've sent me that's not about being trans. But I read it and I was like, oh, this actually makes me feel kind of validated in my gender. Which is exactly what you probably weren't intending. Because here you are writing something different from normal. So, when I was little, I picked a lotus from the pond. My mother yelled when I came inside, mud now in the carpet and well-kept lawn. But she smiled when she saw the flower in my pocket. She placed it in a vase of water, a plaid bow tied neatly around it. I looked its way each day, and as the clocks turned forward, hours turned to days, and the lotus started to decay. The leaves shriveled up. And this is kind of going to be a very personal interpretation, admittedly, so lotus flowers are important to me. My channel is called 2/3 Lotus. I've written many poems about lotus flowers. When I get my first tattoo, I have an idea for my first tattoo, chat. I'm going to do actually 2 on the back of my hands, and the right side is going to be a circle with like 1/3 of it cut out, right? So like this part will not be here, right? And that'll be on this hand. And the left hand is going to have the other part, like the cutout of the circle, over here. And that fraction of 2/3, which kind of also represents my channel and my thoughts on incompleteness in life and things, that's all also related to the lotus flower. So these are representations kind of like the lotus flower, but I just want the circle. On the backhand, like the most painful ones. Well, if I start with the most painful, then like, you know, it only gets easier. But actually, the tattoos that I'm most interested in having in general are hand tattoos, which might be kind of wild, but I would low-key like start with my hands and go out from there. Anyway. So for me, the lotus as a flower is this idea of like completeness and wholeness, and that in a sense comes from Buddhism, but also just my personal appreciation for the flower. And they grow and die through time, of course, like any flower does, but I watched, it was actually a lily, which they're related flowers, a lily in a pond over multiple weeks when I was in college. In the autumn, and it, you know, I watched it grow and open, and if I went in the morning, I could see the flower open and close at the end of the day, and then I watched it die as winter came, and that was kind of the original inspiration for writing about a lotus flower in my work. I have early works that mention it. And for me, it's life, it's completeness, and that also has connections with my gender, right? Becoming complete. So, picking the lotus flower, finding that beautiful, perfect thing, bringing it inside and trying to keep it alive. This almost echoes to me like gender, and also as a trans femme, the flower is beautiful. The flower is a feminine thing. Flowers are feminine, and if this was me, if this was a boy finding a flower, wanting to show it, and then every time he picks the flower, and find something that makes him think. Maybe there is completeness here. Maybe there is beauty in life. Maybe I could be something else. It starts to decay. The longer I be trans, the more chances I have to remember old memories and think about how they relate to my gender right now. Dude, that's so ironic. The original flower before I wrote about the lotus was lilies. Yeah, I mean they're very similar flowers. I think they're like the same thing basically, just different places. The leaves shriveled up, the petals turned brown. I asked my mother if the flower was starting to drown. She laughed and took it down, placed the vase where I could see. The petals were spots, the leaves now float beneath the sea. The lotus is dying. I'd also like to imagine that this poem is actually just a veiled death threat. I think this would be funny. I think sometime we should have a competition for writing poetry that is just veiled death threats toward me. The lotus, that's me. The lotus is dying. The lotus has been picked and left to die. It's an omen. Yeah, that's me. 2/3 lotus. 1/3 lotus by tomorrow. Y'all brutal. Wow. Like cutting me in half. Oh, that's so good. Y'all are great. It would eventually turn to dust that all things die. So would she. So would I. So in that sense, I could make this she the potential, she the future me, she the gender, right? So would I. Even though this is the mom talking, the lotus could be a she too, as a flower. And then she said the lotus is dying, that all things would eventually turn to dust, that all things died, so would she, so would I. It's an interesting spin. I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling lights, small green stars that glowed so bright. The sky, potential, things that could be, things we cannot reach. I did not sleep. The next day, as I dug through the garden and played with my toys, I noticed a flower that stood poised. My mother said it was an aster, and I picked up the flower quick, ran inside, trying to cherish any little bit of that flower, of flowers, of what that is to me, and trying to keep it alive, trying to express it, right? And then people will tell you that we cannot change the facts of life. That makes this almost like a scary kind of thing, with being told, oh no, you can't change the fact of life, you're a boy. But we can change what we do, appreciate what we have, and not what we lose. And then there's also this idea, potentially, of the flower dying. Could even be like, in some sense, the old self. It's like stretching, but the idea that sometimes we worry what we're gonna lose when we transition. To say, like, I'm gonna be this different person, and I don't know if I'm gonna like that, and it's scary, and I'm gonna change. But not worrying about what we lose. Life is precious, death teaches us that, dead names, not crying over loss. It's like, it's a stretch, but it came to mind, and it actually kind of gave me some comfort. So, like, obviously it's taking a very, like, subversive interpretation to what it feels like is the authorial intent. OMG, maybe one day we could try like poem collabs and see how different permutations and combinations work out. Like Penguin X Drowning Devil, Ginny X Drowning Devil. Yeah, yeah. And it could, yeah, I mean, we have a quite a group going. Nico. I would love to do some interesting poetry events in our community. I was thinking, since apparently like people are already writing poems for each other, notably Stylish Fail, giving hats in exchange for poems. I'm like, oh well, we could do a poem like gift exchange for the holidays, or like Secret Santa, where you write a poem for someone assigned randomly, and all of that. Hi, Mom. You're still in chat. Mom gifted a sub today. Thank you. Love you, Mom. Mom, we're reading Drowning Devil's poem, "The Flowers Fall Like Bodies," and I'm talking about stuff. That would be so cool. Poem gift exchange in the community. Yeah, it could be fun. Okay. So another interpretation could kind of be like, since we talk specifically about the lotus, like enlightenment, in that we pick the lotus flower, the symbol of enlightenment, and then as whenever we try to grasp it and capture it, it is something that cannot be held. And then we watch it die. We get close to it, very close. If anyone has been particularly spiritual in their lifetimes, or let's say meditated, or other faiths, like you get these really like close spiritual experiences. It's not really my jam anymore to be like super spiritual, but like, and then you find yourself falling away and the lotus dying, and then it's troubling and you stay awake at night, and then you try to notice in everything, and it only ends up being something that takes you further away from your goal. And it sucks, and you cry. And we cannot change the facts of life. We can change what we do, appreciate what we have, not what we lose. Life is precious. And all of these are very, like, I would say, simple conclusions that come from, like, sort of being a Buddhist. So as like a quick overview of why it kind of could be interpreted that way, that's why. Drowning Devil. But I guess I'm most interested. I'm not that interested in my other interpretations. It is very clear and has this moral at the end. And like I said, I do agree. The poem speaks to all of these things. We cannot change the facts of life. The flower dies, we try to keep it alive. We can change what we do. And that could be appreciating it as the plant that it is, or whatever. Appreciate what we have and not what we lose. Remember the joy that it gave the child in the moment to look at the flower every day. It's somewhere up here. I looked its way each day. Right? That's what the child should remember. That's a moral. And not what we lose. Life is precious, and death teaches us that. Again, another moral. Do not cry over a loss. Be happy that you were there to see it live. And this is something that's interesting, because when you're talking about a big theme, death, there's so many things we know about how we cope with death, morals that can help us deal with it, things like this. And I do almost feel like you throw like all of them at us, and it makes each one feel a little less important in my mind, because I think each of these ideas cannot change the facts of life, but change what we do, can have a poem of this length unto itself. In fact, you could have just this, just that line, just those two lines, that couplet, as the moral of your poem. So perhaps one approach, if I'm talking about your morals here that you've provided, you could try to synthesize them and take all of these four very similar but disparate ideas and put them under one banner. Slow and steady wins the race. For the tortoise, which is saying don't push yourself harder than you can. Don't rush through things. Appreciate the slow stuff. Don't burn yourself out. Or just take life slow. Be consistent. These are all lines that you could get from the tortoise and the hare. But the tortoise and the hare at the end just says slow and steady wins the race, or at least that's what we've societally taken from it. And maybe we can go in and try to find some Aesop's fables. But it makes me wonder if you can include a single line that combines all of these. And I don't know how you would do it, admittedly. Maybe I'll cut off that end bit and turn them each into their own poem. I have no real ideas for them. It's possible. Yes, you very well could. You could try to write a poem, because this one speaks for all of them, and write a poem that specifically digs into this one, and specifically digs into this couplet, and this couplet, and this couplet, because they are absolutely deep and complex enough to warrant hundreds of poems, as they already have in history. So, and I do think having a moral that is too broad or too many things or too complicated does make it a little less effective, right? As part of the analysis, I am going to go find, I think, the tortoise and the hare, literally the story. And the tortoise and the hare. Yeah, so that is indeed an Aesop fable. And Aesop is a super old dude. He's dead. It looks like I see a statue of him. He was Greek. So these go back forever, right? That's kind of the point. But I have located it. So here is the tortoise and the hare. A very silly thing, I feel, to be reading on Twitch, because this is, of course, a children's story, but it's one that has literally persisted for millennia. Right? Aesop was in before Common Era, which is wild. A hare was making fun of the tortoise one day for being so slow. "Do you ever get anywhere?" he asked with a mocking laugh. "Yes," replied the tortoise, "and I get there sooner than you think. I'll run you a race to prove it." The hare was much amused at the idea of running a race with the tortoise, but for the fun of the thing he agreed. So the fox, who had consented to act as a judge, marked the distance and started the race, or started the runners off. The hare was soon far out of sight, and to make the tortoise feel very deeply how ridiculous it was for him to try to race with the hare, he lay down beside the course to take a nap until the tortoise should catch up. The tortoise, meanwhile, kept going slowly but steadily, there slow and steady, and after a time passed the place where the hare was sleeping. But the hare slept on very peacefully, and when at last he did wake up, The tortoise was near the goal. The hare now ran his swiftest, but he could not overtake the tortoise in time. The race is not always to the swift. So this is the moral. Like, it's literally there in the same way that yours is. But this is even more broad than slow and steady win the race. This encompasses slow and steady is a way to do better in life. But this also talks about that having an ego is a way to get behind. The hare lost in a sense because he stopped to make fun of the tortoise. Having an ego loses you the race. And now we have like dual interpretations of the tortoise and the hare. And within like going slow as a better approach to life, you have so many interpretations. And we know all the ways that having too much ego, too much head about you can like be bad and obviously lead to your failure. So, but Aesop, the beauty of what he does here is say the race is not always to the swift. He doesn't tell you, don't have a big ego. He doesn't tell you, going slow and sustainable is a better way to live. Aesop tells you the race is not always to the swift. And I think that's the beauty of the fable there, and the moral, because it leaves some vagueness, right? Aesop's fables, while very straightforward, they literally tell a story, right? Which in a way puts them somewhere up here. Prose is very specific. It just writes about something and describes it. But the moral, the race is not always to the swift, has so many interpretations that can apply to our lives. And so that is an option of something you can do with your work, and something that you can learn from what is really a simple piece of writing and media. And I've been thinking lately about how much I value the idea of like children's media as a tool to teach not only children, but like I think there is still so much value in it as an adult. And revisiting the tortoise and the hare, which we sort of probably see as this children's thing, and it is, you can realize that there is an application to your life. My fascination with children's media came when I watched Avatar The Last Airbender for the first time ever, and it was like in the last year, right? And I had not had anything spoiled. Somehow, I didn't know what was going to happen with the Fire Nation and Aang and all these things, and Zuko and, everyone, right? And it did such a good job of telling like simple almost morals and stories and beautiful things that applied to me as an adult. Maybe not a very functioning adult, and maybe an adult child in some respects, but like that's the beauty. And I think the perfect moral is one that is vague. It also makes sense that sort of we have latched on societally to one interpretation. Slow and steady wins the race as the moral of this poem. But that's not what Aesop wrote. He wrote the race is not always to the swift. And that's freaking brilliant. And it also makes a lot of sense as a moral that we wouldn't accept in the modern day, because we live in a world where we run races of money, and we run races of trying to be the best and the smartest, and we think and we tell people that the one who works the hardest is going to be the one who succeeds. So of course we're going to reject something. The race is not always to the swift, which on face value and upon reflection very much goes against our societal ideals, right? So, yeah. That's why I think that's cool. And I would encourage you, and I would encourage myself, because I forgot that Aesop's fables existed until literally today, and I'm writing works that are very similar now to Aesop's fables. I'll tell you all one of the stories sometime. But it's so valuable. And yeah, I heavily value children's media. Ought it never crossed my mind to reference it in poetry. Yes. And the thing is, I think every single form of media can and will be valuable to you in your, poetic journey. Do not just read poetry if you want to be a poet. Read essays, philosophical essays, or argumentative essays, or modern, political essays. Those things are going to influence the way you write. And read novels, and read nonfiction, and read romance and horror and every genre ever. And watch movies. Essays can be fun. And read speeches. There's so many great speakers. The speeches of Martin Luther King, and letters. His letters. Who knows? Einstein has beautiful letters. So many people have written things. And read it all. I know, essays, it sounds scary because, it's the school thing. But people write them to argue. Avi, welcome. Sorry, it took me a second. I was finishing that point, and I'm not done with it. Interesting. Also, I didn't read the story until I was 13. That sounds about right. Maybe one would expect earlier. Sob essays. Okay. An essay. Okay, Penguino Man. You wrote a beautiful, powerful essay and sent it to me, and I told you how much I enjoyed reading it. You have seen that someone can read an essay and enjoy it and take personal value out of it. Read essays. People write them and they're good. I'm going to... I don't know. Hey, that's different. Hey, man. That's different. That's my essay. No, it's not different. I have this one spoken poem that made me want to write poetry, but I never wrote my first until months later. Yeah, no. Everything is gonna help you write. Music, movies, TV. If you let a piece of art and a piece of media be something that can inspire you, then it will. But I don't think I have so much Penguin wrote your favorite work in Teapot. Oh, that's so funny. Y'all are great. I'm gonna read this one more time because I think I don't have too much more to say. I think we've had an interesting conversation and teaching moment about media and fables and all of these things. So I'm going to read this one more time. And, keeping the kind of media you ingest broad will always be good for you. That's part of life. Exactly. Yeah. And then it's also realizing that it's not just good. It's good for all parts of life. And that includes your own media creation. As long as you don't let consumption overtake the amount you make, try to do everything. Watch classic film. listen to great music of all genres. Read everything. Write everything. It'll be good for you. And I think this stream is a way to help y'all with that, so it's good. Anyway, I'm gonna read The Flowers Fall Like Bodies. When I was little, I picked a lotus from the pond. My mother yelled when I came inside. Mud now in the carpet and well-kept lawn. But she smiled when she saw the flower in my pocket. She placed it in a vase of water, a plaid bow tied neatly around it. I looked its way each day. And as the clocks turned forward, hours turned to days. And lotus started to decay. The leaves shriveled up. The petals turned brown. I asked my mother if the flower was starting to drown. She laughed and took it down. Placed the vase where I could see the petals wore spots. The leaves now float beneath the sea. She said, "The lotus is dying." That it would eventually turn to dust, that all things died, so would she, so would I. I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling lights, small green stars that glowed so bright. I did not think, I did not sleep. The next day I dug through the garden, and as I played with my toys, I noticed a flower that stood poised. My mother said it was an aster, and I picked the flower. Quick, ran inside, grabbed a glass, and placed the flower inside it. For the next few days, I did everything I could to keep her alive, but she died, and so did the next. And the one after that, I cried to my mother, asked her why. She put me in her lap and sighed, "We cannot change the facts of life, but we can change what we do. Appreciate what we have and not what we lose. Life is precarious, and death teaches us that. Do not cry over a loss. Be happy you were there to see it live." The Flowers Fall Like Bodies by drowningdevil12. Thank you for watching. I encourage you to check out the rest of the series, follow if you enjoyed, and stop by Twitch if you want to share your own work. See you there.